at WVON.
We're your original social media.
You're listening to Inspirational Perspective with Linal Harris on 1690, The Talk of Chicago.
The views expressed on our programs are not necessarily those of WVON, Midway Broadcasting Corporation, or our participating sponsors.
If you want to be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibility. Find your power, passion, and purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dream. It's right now. Inspirational perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live. Let's find your purpose now. Inspirational perspective. Let's slay your goals, let your greatness flow. With inspirational perspective.
Good morning, Chicago. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach, right here on WVON 1690 AM, The Talk of Chicago. Inspirational Perspective on your radio is all about murdering mediocrity and living the best life possible. So as I ask you every Sunday morning, are you living the best life possible? And this is the place to be to explore that possibility. Well, good Sunday morning, everyone. February 28th. And man, am I excited to be back on the air, feeling blessed to be back on the air. When you look at everything that's going on in our nation, especially those in Texas, prayers go out to them on what's happening right here in our country. Feels unreal in many ways, but our prayers are with them. And excited to be back in the studio. As you guys know, last week we had a special Valentine's Day recording. Very, very fun show. The top 5 mistakes that we made in marriage. Pam and I were joined by another couple, and we talked about those mistakes. If you missed that broadcast, you definitely want to check it out. It's available on YouTube now. It's still on my public Facebook page. You can go there at Coach Linal Harris, like the page. And we're streaming this live to you this morning, straight from that page as well. So you can check it out there. Today's topic: the 7 steps to creating a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship. Now, last week we talked about what it's like to be married. And we talked about, my wife and I, Jocelyn, Jonathan, we talked about the mistakes that we had made in marriage and the things that we distinguished, every year as our relationships got stronger. And I got a lot of emails and notes and texts, you name it, from you all who really enjoyed the show. But one of the questions I kept getting was, well, Linal, that's great. And it gives me something to look forward to in terms of relationship. But how do I even get there? Like, what steps would a person take to get there? And to be honest, I sat back and thought about it. And I asked myself, have I ever really broken down how I got into a healthy, loving relationship in one dedicated show? Have I ever done that? And, I went through the archives. I realized I hadn't. I have never done a complete show on just talking about how I, on a personal level, got into a loving, healthy relationship. And then I realized that while I've had relationship experts and different people on, and we've talked about relationship, that we've never really focused on how to prepare oneself. Or another way to think about it is not just how to prepare yourself for a relationship, but if you're in relationship, how to begin ensuring that it stays healthy and loving. And I said, well, I need to do that. And this is that show. 7 steps to creating a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to take my time and just go through the 7 steps. Maybe it'll be just this one show. Maybe it might leak into next week. I'm not sure. But whatever we do, what I'm excited about is the opportunity to share, for me, what worked and what I do believe works for many other people in terms of the clients I've helped over the last decade, hundreds of clients, many of them who had relationship projects, helping them find relationship, healthy, loving relationship through the work of coaching, and helping those who were already married turn their marriages around. I can recall one particular client that reached out to me specifically to get divorced. Linal, I'm hiring you because I want a divorce. It's like, wow, okay. I didn't say wow, by the way. I just said, okay. My job is to help people create powerfully from the future with no judgment. And so after some conversation, him and I said, all right, hey, let's go with this. And we began working on creating his divorce. Now, here's the thing, and this is the beauty of coaching. As he began to look inward and get fully present to what he wanted to create, shortly into the coaching, he decided that maybe the best choice was to stay married. And I'm happy to report that was years ago. And that client not only is still married, but has 2 healthy children and a loving, healthy relationship. So I'm sharing that because these steps I'm going to share, I know that they work. Okay, I don't think that they work. I know that they work because I've seen the results in many, many, many clients. Some who I'm working with right now, many who I've worked with in the past. So I wanted to start probably a little unconventional. And I want to start with marriage metrics first. And the reason I want to start with marriage metrics, because I think a lot of us think that when it comes to following steps, whether it's diet, health, money, like I think often we get sidetracked and we believe we do not have to follow all the steps. I'm special. I don't have to follow all the steps. And before we get into this, I just want to be really clear about why you should follow these steps. If you are looking to be in a relationship, if you're looking to transform your relationship, this is why you should follow these steps. So, 1, the national marriage rate fell from 6.9 to 6.5 marriages per 1,000 people. And this happened from 2016 to 2018. Okay. And to put this in perspective, the marriage rate was 8.2 marriages per 1,000 people back in 2001. And so what you can see is that marriage ultimately is on the decline, but keep listening. And of course, we know that, back in the 50s, 60s, marriage rates were way higher, like double digits per 1,000. Now, the number of Americans living, see, because when we talk about relationship now, we can't just talk about marriage per se in the 21st century. So I'm talking to everybody. When I say, I could have named the show How to Build or How to Create a Healthy, Loving, Long-Lasting Marriage. But I get that relationship is probably the best place to go because while, again, a little under half of the United States is married, many of us who are not are still in relationship in some capacity. And so the number of Americans living with an unmarried partner reached about 18 million in 2016, and that's up 29% from 2007. Now, what's interesting about 2007? Well, that was right before the Great Recession. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that many of us, and this is me just looking at the data, but many of us, based on today's economic opportunities or challenges, are finding ourselves in relationships that if it weren't for economic reasons, we probably wouldn't be in. Okay? Because when I look at the data, 07 up from 07, 29% to 2016, and even on the rise now, at least that's how I see the data. Okay? Now, almost 50% of all marriages in the United States will end in divorce or separation. 50%. And researchers estimate that 41% of all first marriages end in divorce. 41%. By the way, these are stats and data that kept me from wanting to get married for years. Because again, I love data. I look at data, and when I look at data, I don't eliminate myself from the data. I always say, hey, man, this is basically the mean or the average. What makes you feel like you won't fall out of that? Okay. And so here's the deal. Okay. 41% of all first marriages end in divorce. And you would think that after the first marriage, people would get better at relationship. Like whatever you didn't know, you would learn. But the data says something different, because 60% of second marriages end in divorce. So the second marriage, according to the data, typically does not work out better than the first marriage. Why? I just believe it's because they're missing these 7 steps. Like, you keep going because the grass is greener on the other side, or it's that person, but you bring yourself into the marriage, and if you haven't accounted for yourself, well, guess what? It's going to fail again, right? Because what do we do typically when we're in a relationship? We point the finger. That's something we're going to learn about today. All right? Here's the third part. 73% of all third marriages end in divorce. So folks, it doesn't get easier and it doesn't get better. So right now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about, man, if I could just get rid of my spouse, everything would get better. According to the data, all right, according to the data, it doesn't get better. It gets worse. Why? Well, I believe that one of the reasons is because we're not looking at ourselves. And I'm about to get into the 7 steps in a minute, but I really want to drive this home. Why? As I was looking at this, I'm like, man, I got to talk about it. I got to talk about how do we get into healthy, loving, long-lasting relationships? Because the data is awful. Check this out. Every 13 seconds, there is 1 divorce in America. By the way, this data is pre-pandemic. Because a lot of y'all don't like y'all spouses no more since you've been locked down. All right, let's just keep it real. You're not feeling them at all. We're going to get into that. All right. That equates, check this out, to 277 divorces per hour. 6,646 divorces per day, and 46,523 divorces per week. Ultimately, to about 2.4 million divorces a year. That means, like, by the time you can say your vows as a newlywed, 9 people have divorced. All right, so this is real. Okay, I could keep going. I got more data. But let's just say that what we're finding is that relationship is hard. Because what we're not talking about are people who don't even get married and break up. People who have children and thought they were going to stay together and break up. Right? We're not even talking about that. We're just talking, these are marriage stats. By the way, the average first marriage that ends in divorce only lasts about 8 years. Interestingly enough, this is my 8-year anniversary on the radio today. Yeah, so congrats to me in inspirational perspective. Anniversary, happy anniversary. All right, so, but let's do what we mean, why I came on the air in the first place, and that's to help people live their best life. So, folks, this is the reality. Okay? There was one more here that I thought was interesting in terms of stats. You guys get it. This is the numbers are sobering, to say the least. Okay? And my big question is, when we're talking about relationship, healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship, 7 steps, do I have your attention yet? Do I have your attention? All right, so here's what I do know. From the surveys I sent out, from the emails I get, from all of it, most of us want to be in a healthy, loving relationship. That's the majority of us, right? So right now somebody's saying, that's why I'm not married. That's why I don't want to be in a relationship. This show ain't for you, okay? But the majority of us, we want to be in healthy, loving, long-lasting relationships. And what I did is I've gone through my coaching notes. I've gone through advice I've given on different shows. I've gone through advice that's been given on my show from relationship experts. And I rounded out what I believe are the most important steps, 7 steps we should take if we want to create a loving, healthy relationship. So let's get into step 1. We got a lot to cover. Step number 1, I don't think this is going to surprise you. Might not make you incredibly happy, but I don't think it's going to surprise you. In order, just the first step, right? And by the way, I'm doing this in terms of like the order you should go in. Not sensationalism, like what's the best one I'm going to save for last. This is the order on a very personal level that you should go in and taking these steps. Number 1, know who you are and love who you are. Now, I'm going to be clear about this. I'm not going to mince my words. If you don't love yourself, you cannot expect someone else to adequately love you. You can't expect it. You don't even love you. How can you even teach or train somebody else to love you? It's impossible. I'm going to tell you something. I believe one of the reasons for the divorce rate right now, people who haven't learned to love themselves. And they believe that the answer to love is outside of them versus inside of them. And we must first fix ourselves. We must first fix ourselves. You cannot expect for someone else to come fix you. You cannot expect for someone else to come fix what you believe may be broken about you. That is not their job. That is your job. Period. Your job is to get fully connected to yourself and fall in love with yourself. Because if you can't fully love you, then here's the deal. You will not allow, hear me out, you will not allow anybody else to fully love you. Some of us, the problem isn't your spouse. The problem isn't your boyfriend, your girlfriend. The problem is you. You don't love yourself. And so every time they try an act of generosity, an act of love, you knock it down. Oh, you doing that again? Oh, I would have known that you were doing that because you do that every week. You do that like, stop being so predictable. You're complaining about being loved? You're complaining? Like, and the reason most of us are complaining is because we can't accept it. You don't know how to be with it because you haven't learned to love yourself. So notice I said two things. I want to be very clear about this. One, know who you are. Two, love who you are. That's all one. So the first step is know who you are and love who you are. I should have probably broke it down into two. But many of us, we don't even know who we are. You don't know who you are. So because you don't know who you are, then the person who you are trying to love or trying to accept love from doesn't know who you are because you can't even articulate your wants and needs. And if you can't articulate your wants and needs, they may not even be what you really truly want and need. They may be what you've been told in terms of how we've been socialized that you want and need it. I can recall a friend of mine, he bought a brand new house, beautiful house. Said, man, this is gorgeous. What made you guys move? Said, well, my wife, she told me if I got her a new kitchen, it would make her happier and she would cook more. And so I did everything I could to work hard, get the house with the big kitchen. He said, and he kind of looked at me with disgust. She ain't even cooked yet. Now, here's the thing. No shade on the wife and no shade on him. But I do believe his wife believed what she was saying when she said it. But the problem is she just didn't know herself. She didn't know who she was. She didn't know what she desired. She didn't know what she wanted. And likely somebody else she knew got a big house with a bigger kitchen. And she says, ooh, that's what I want, because she didn't know herself. And because she didn't know herself, she gave that to her man. That's what I want. And because all he has to go off of is what she says, then that's what he did. Guess what? The relationship ended in a divorce. We have to know ourselves. We have to know ourselves. And so let me give you just a few questions, starter questions, to assist you in your self-assessment. So you can get, all of us can get fully present to who we are. Like, who am I? Like, who am I truly? So here's the first self-assessment question for step number one. Step number one again is know who you are, love who you are. First question, what are your strengths? What are your strengths? Now, believe it or not, this is not a trick question. Let's face it. If you're going to partner up with someone else for life, it might be good that you happen to just know your strengths, the things that you're really good at, the things that you know that you can, over a long period of time, consistently bring to a relationship, the things that that person can count on about you. And so when dating someone else, the only way for you to know their strengths in a short period of time is, when we're in the dating process, we ask. And it'll say, tell me about yourself. Like, what do you do well? And everybody is all smiles on the first couple of days. But my question is, how do you respond? Because most of us skate through those kind of answers. Oh, well, I do this for a living and I do that. And the reason we skate is because we don't know. And you might say, well, Linal, that's a large assumption that you're making there, that we don't know. And by the way, for those of us who are intimately connected with ourselves, I'm not necessarily talking to you. I'm talking to the majority. Okay? Because in the work that I do, what I find more often than not is that the hardest work for people to do is the work of self-discovery. In the Discover and Live Your Life's Purpose workshop, one of the questions I ask, what are your strengths? And it's also one of the most difficult parts of the workshop for participants because they're sitting there with themselves, nobody else around, thinking about themselves and what they bring to the world and who they are. And many folks draw a blank because they've never been asked that question in a form where they've been held accountable for the answers. Because on a date, you can get by. Oh, yeah, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, blah, blah, blah. They don't really know. And half the time, if it's not going anywhere, they don't really care. What are your strengths? And here's the thing. If you are insecure, if you lack confidence, then your ability to really hone in on what you're strong at, what you're gifted at, is going to be murked up or muddled by that voice, that negative self-talk. And that's something that has to be handled. Because if it will beat you up, like, listen to me clearly. If it will beat you up, if it will cast you down, and you continue to let it, what do you think it will do to your significant other in the future? You think it's going to hold punches on them when it won't hold punches on you? Like, do you really think that your negative self-talk, if you don't learn how to curb it and manage it, is going to give your partner a break if you get in relationship? Oh, let me tell you from personal experience, your negative self-talk will do a number on you, but it will do jiu-jitsu, judo, aikido, all of them on your partner. Okay? Folks, there's a reason why the divorce rate is so high. I started with that. You have to get to know who you are. Now, here's the second question. This is the tougher one. What are your weaknesses? See, again, most relationship experts go with, you got to love yourself. But I'm going to go with, before we go into loving yourself, do you even know who you're loving? Like, who are you? Like, have you really got down? Like, do you love yourself for your strengths? Do you love yourself for your weaknesses? Do you love it all? Because when you do, then you can allow somebody else in and say, well, yeah, babe, I'm not so good at that. That's why I married you. What are your weaknesses? Now, here's the deal. It's likely if you're anything like me, you're not perfect. Okay? And this probably means that there are some things you don't do all that well. Like me. I don't do everything well. And what I can tell you from experience is that it's nice to have a spouse that complements your opportunities with their strengths and vice versa. But it's difficult to get a spouse if you don't know it, if you don't know your weaknesses. And let me be clear about that. It's difficult to get a spouse that complements your opportunities and strengths if you don't know your opportunities and strengths. So, I'm trying my best to stay in order. My mind is like, man, go here. So, if you're not doing this self-assessment or this assessment, then the problem is that self-love starts with you. Like, you have to assess yourself. We're so good at assessing others. I can ask somebody right now, they give me a phone call, what is your spouse weak at? What is your spouse strong at? They'll be like, oh, she's weak at this and she's weak at that and she needs to do this better, right? We can see other folk, but what about you? Because the better you are, the more connected you are to yourself, the more success you're going to have in relationship. The least connected you are, to yourself, the least you know yourself, the more trouble you're going to have. I can say that with certainty. Okay? So knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses will enhance your life whether you are in a relationship or not. And knowing where you stand helps you navigate life better and eliminate surprises. Because I know my talents, because I know my strengths, because I know my weaknesses, there are some things that I'm just not trying to do. Why? Because I know that because I know these things about myself, it just makes my life smoother if I just operate around that. I'm not doing that. Or let me hire somebody else to do that because I know I'm weak at that. Or let me talk to my wife and see if she'll do it because I know I'm weak at that. For example, if you struggle with managing your money and finances, First big step in coaching, we call it, awareness is the first step. Awareness. You have to be aware and you have to admit it to yourself. And again, one of the reasons we're not admitting things to ourselves is because this whole thing about self-love. Self-love is being real about who you are. Deficits, gifts and talents, all of it. And loving yourself despite it. That's self-love. This is who I am. This is what makes me special. And then from that place, you can step into relationship because you've already accepted who you are. You know who you are and you love who you are. So let's say I struggle with money. All right. I struggle managing my finances. Well, if I do that, I will probably solicit some outside support, coaching, something like that, right? Now, if I know that about myself and I meet someone else who struggles with money and finances, the beautiful thing is, one, I'm less likely to judge them for their weakness because I've already accepted it as my weakness, right? And here's the thing. Here's just a human truth. We're triggered by what we can't be with. We get triggered in other people by what we can't be within ourselves. So if I can't be with my weakness with money, and I haven't accepted my weakness with money, guess what's going to drive me up the wall? Marrying someone else who's weak with money. Because I haven't accepted mine, and so I'm not about to accept theirs. I'm not. I'm going at their head. You can't never keep no money. And then they'll be like, you can't either. We're not talking about you right now, or me right now, right? And this gets nasty. But if I know this about me, and I see it in my spouse, I say, oh, here's something I've done to compensate for that. Maybe we should both do it. I have outside personal structures and support to help me manage my money. And like I said, it's none of us are perfect. And so understanding who we are, how we show up, knowing who we are, how we show up, and loving that is incredibly important. Because you're not perfect either. And the fact of the matter is, we all have weaknesses. And the most important part is that we know them. Now, I got some phone calls. I'm going to get you guys in a second. Now, let me talk about this weakness piece just a little bit more. I want to drive this home. Back when I was an executive, I was a hiring leader in corporate America. And by the way, I still ask this question now. So if you ever end up on the docket to to interview with me in my company and you listen to this, like, be ready for this question. But back when I was in corporate America and I was a hiring leader, one of the final interview questions, it was like the last question I would ask for potential leaders, was always, tell me about your weaknesses and how you've learned to compensate for them. And what would happen is most of my interviewees would typically stare back at me in shock because they felt like, man, I'm at the final. I killed this interview. I asked them, so what do you do well? What did you do at this company? Why is this job right for you? And all those things they were prepared to answer. Then here I come with, tell me about your weaknesses and how you've learned to compensate for them. And I get the blank stare. And the reason I got the blank stare is because most of us only prepare for the good stuff, right? Only prepared and practiced clearly how to articulate their strengths and all the things that they've done well, but not necessarily the things they don't know how to do well. And here's what happened. If a potential leader couldn't articulate or acknowledge a weakness, I didn't hire them. Because it didn't matter how well they did on the rest of the interview to me. What mattered is the fact that I only wanted leaders who had the fortitude to acknowledge their weaknesses. Because I've always believed that the ability to acknowledge weakness is a sign of emotional intelligence. And I think that all of us can agree that when it comes to choosing a life partner, the ability for that individual to not only know their weaknesses, but be able to articulate their weaknesses is much more important than hiring the right person for a job. So what are your weaknesses? Could you even articulate it on a date? And by the way, if they go running, let them run. They weren't for you. In my opinion, there is no better way to identify if a person will actually be able to hear your relationship feedback a year from now, when you're in relationship, than by experiencing their willingness to admit the things they know they don't do so well right now. If they can't admit a weakness to you right now, in the beginning, okay, you try getting them to admit a weakness later in the relationship. Good luck. I don't see it happening. Because here's the thing, a person with no weaknesses isn't a person I want to be with, I want to work with, I don't want nothing to do with them. Because they would never be able to understand me and my weaknesses. All right, so I got enough time for a call. By the way, if you have questions about this, give me a phone call, 773-591-1690. I want to make sure that you all really get this. Step one. Know who you are. Love who you are. Know who you are. Love who you are. Let's go to Mike real quick on line one. Mike, good morning. How are you, brother?
Hey, good morning. How you doing, my brother? Man, you got it going on now. I call you an international brother, but you know something that's interesting? The relationship thing is key. You got to know yourself, right?
Yeah, man.
So much. I mean, and then here's the other piece. Why do people rush into these concepts of relationship because they see everybody else in a relationship? Like, you just got to have somebody.
Yeah. Well,
that person ain't compatible to you, man.
Yeah, but you know what, man? It's a natural thing. I think it's a natural desire. It's part of how we're made, and I think
get deeper than that though. When you met your wife, it's about the universe, right?
Yeah, true.
But she wasn't located right there next to you. In the universe, when you put out what you put out, then all the draws to you gonna draw to you in time.
Hey, right? Man, you getting in front of me, Mike. You getting in front of me, bro. I'm gonna talk about that.
Well, I'm not trying to, but you know,
I know, I'm messing with you.
The universe showered you with the blessings that you receive.
Yeah.
If you ain't in tune with the universe, you probably doing a whole bunch of stuff, choosing people that ain't directing you.
Man.
You ain't living no best life. You don't know nothing about that.
Well, you know what? I think it's more than.
One more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
This you didn't bring out, but I know you always do this. You ain't never brought it up. When you took your first job, man, you had a job, right?
Yeah.
Why was it that you looked at that whole operation and learned everybody's job so you knew how the business worked? You didn't just take your job and say, oh, I got my little job, I guess I'll stack boxes or whatever you do. You become an executive because you paid attention to how business works, right?
That's right.
And when time came, you stepped up.
That's right.
But you prepared yourself. You know, oh, well, I got it. No, don't come in a job like that, man. Learn the whole operation.
And I think that's part of what I want to provide today, Mike, with today's topic.
You got it, man. I just like to tap in because, you keep me always on fire because, you're right on point all the time.
I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate the phone
keep
call.
doing it, man. I'll be listening. I wish I could PayPal you every week just so you tips us. Man, we be getting so much information from you. We would be glad to just throw you some money for the appreciation. Man. Anybody that's going to show you how to handle your money and tell you, be honest. If you can't handle your money, get somebody else to handle it that knows how. Don't be broke, be smart, right?
There we go. I'm with that,
and
man.
Go for it. We appreciate you.
All right, brother. All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, look, when we come back, I'm going to give you the third question you want to ask yourself in terms of knowing who you are and how to love yourself. I got Anita from North Carolina on the line. Nate, I see you guys. I'm going to take you at the top of the hour when we get back. Man, there's more. 7 steps. We've only gotten through 2/3 of number 1. And this might go for a while. We'll see. 7 steps to creating a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship. Step number 1, know yourself, know who you are, and then once you know who you are, love who you are. Man, I'm excited. I'm excited to share this, you all. Again, this is my first time dropping this. If you know somebody that needs to hear it over the break, you make sure you reach out to them and say, hey, Linal's talking relationship. He's talking relationship. Make sure they tune in. My name is Linal Harris. You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective right here on WBON 1690 AM, the Talk of Chicago. 7 steps to creating a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship when we get back. Don't change that dial.
If you wanna be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibility.
All right, let me know what questions you guys have. Matter of fact,
look under your bed. Find stuff
you guys know how this goes. Go ahead. If you put a question already, I didn't see it. And so please just copy and paste the question again so I can see it. There are already quite a few comments in here. And is this topic on point? I know I got a lot of notes, a lot of messages on Facebook, emails about last week's show. I'm like, all right, well, let's back up. Okay, how do you even get into marriage? Let's back up so you can make some mistakes. Valentine's Day last week, Sunday. I guess, you call February Black History Month, Love Month. Let's get into it, man. Let's get into it. But what questions do you have? And if you don't have any questions, I'm curious what in particular really stood out for you. It really stood out for you so far. Whether you're in relationship or not. For those of us in relationship, you get in relationship, you get a little more wisdom, man. And you begin to realize what's really, what it really takes to be successful in a marriage. So please share, you guys. Please share this. It's interesting. I just had this thought. I'm like, you get two married couples on in a virtual world talking about their mistakes, and people want to listen to that. But then when you start to break down exactly how to get to where we are, it's kind of like, do people really want to do the work? One, do they want to listen intently and learn? But then secondly, do they really want to do the work?
I'm Sally, a volunteer.
Man, and when I think about the consequence of not following these steps, the loss in time, the years with the person that you end up divorcing, the impact on the children, the continuation of trauma, because by the way, divorce is traumatic on children.
More ice cream trucks. Okay.
Man.
How about you?
So that's the reason for today's topic and today's show, man. And so Any questions you guys have? I think
Can I change my answer?
I was just kidding about the ice cream.
let me see.
That's way better. Now that you mention it.
Clarence said, my ex was strong with money, but she had little patience for people who were not and would talk bad about them. Guess who this person she was married to? Somebody weak with money. Yeah. Yeah, man. And I think, you know, Clarence, I don't know where you were in your process and if you knew that before you got married. But the question I would ask you is, do you think that would have shifted things? Like, would you all even be married if you were able to articulate that confidently? And if you were able to articulate it, the wonderful thing is when your spouse went in on you, you can say, hey, I never said I was strong. You know, like you can come back. I never said I was strong, so help me. You got to be willing to get help, you know. Let's see what other questions do we have. All right. Does embracing the weakness always require changing or compensating for it? How to know what you need to change before getting in a relationship? I would say the first thing is just knowing it. And embracing a weakness. This is how I think about embracing a weakness. Embracing a weakness is just simply acceptance that, okay, this is not something I'm naturally good at. I don't think it means that you ignore it. You wanna create some level of compensation for it, right? And that's what I was talking about. Outside money management, hiring an accountant to help you with your books, whatever it might be. If you're not necessarily good with money and you're single, creating structures. But many of us, we can't change our weaknesses. It's part of our makeup. You know, some of us we can really work hard to make a weakness strong. But typically, Marcus Buckingham, he has a book where he talks about strengths, and the Gallup organization does a lot of work on this. And one of the things they talk about is the energy that you'll put into trying to make a weakness strong is wasted when, if you know the weakness, you compensate for the weakness and do your best to develop your strengths in a way that allows you to compensate for that weakness. So one of the things that Marcus Buckingham talks about is leveraging strength and really focusing on strengths versus, you know, focusing on, oh, I'm not good at this, and so how do I get better at it? It's like, all right, well, what strength do you have that might help you compensate for that? Like, for instance, if I'm an excellent networker and I keep coming back to money, but I'm bad with money, I might use my ability to network to find somebody who is trustworthy, who can actually help me create a budget. If that's a weakness, right? Create a budget, manage the budget, etc. So you use the strength to leverage. So hopefully, I don't know if that answered it. Let me go back to the question and look again. How do we need to change before getting a relationship? And I would say, I don't know that you need to change it. See, this is where we accept ourselves, right? I'll give you an example. One of the things about me in terms of, I did a EQ profile. EQ is emotional intelligence quotient. I did one years ago. And one of the things that came back was I have very low empathy. Very low empathy, very high compassion. So what that means is my ability to read people in terms of how they might feel in a given case is very low. It's a weakness. But if they tell me, my compassion is high. And so if you tell me I'm not feeling good, or you tell me that I'm hurting right now, then I can, based on what I hear, I can become compassionate, and that will make up for my lack of empathy, my ability to just know. So after getting married, that's something I share with my wife. Hey, my empathy is very low. My compassion is high. You have to communicate with me. As much as I want to change that, Belle, it's not something I can just up and change. Like it's going to take lots of work. And so it's better for me to know that about myself and communicate that to my spouse. Say, hey, just let me know. And she'll tell you, like, I'll miss it. I mean, I'll miss cues. She'll be like, you didn't know I was upset? Like, no, I didn't know. You got to tell me I'm upset. And not necessarily upset with me. She might be upset about something else. Like, but when she tells me, I'm like, oh, what happened? What do you need? You know, my compassion's high. So Cool. That makes sense to you? Awesome. Yeah, man, Pat, when you don't love yourself, you will not allow someone else to love you. Matter of fact, you won't believe it. Like a lot of us won't believe it because we're not loving ourselves. So how could they love me? So then it's like, well, what do you want? What are you after? We become, suspicious in ways that we don't necessarily have to be suspicious. It's something hard. Yeah. This is where, so that was an emotional intelligence quotient. I'll tell you all, I take almost any assessment I can get my hands on because to me, it's about knowing who I am. I'm careful with the assessment because different assessments show up different ways.
Inspirational perspective.
But
with
ultimately,
Linal Harris
I do the
on
best I can to
1690,
know as
the
much
talk
about me
of
as I possibly
Chicago.
can.
If you wanna be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibility. Find your power, passion, and purpose. It's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Now, inspiration and perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live your dream. Purpose now. Inspiration and perspective. Let's slay your goals, let your greatness flow. With inspirational perspective.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach, right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. The topic today, 7 steps to creating a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship. And we are in step number 1. Step number 1 is know who you are, love who you are, fully love who you are. All the crooks and crannies and cracks and excellence and gifts and talents and all the wonderful things God gave you, all of it, the good and even what you consider bad. All right, we got a couple of phone calls. Let me take these calls before we get back into the steps. Anita, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning. I wish we had talked a little more before you took me, but this is what I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
I found out one of my biggest weaknesses, because I'm a humble person, so I never walk around and act like I know everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my strengths, okay? But I learned that when I get under a lot of pressure and a lot of things are hitting me and I'm figuring out how to do all these things, is to renew yourself and keep going. You have to renew yourself, so you can't work with some of the old things sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that's something I wasn't really strong on, but I'm learning how to cope with it. But I don't know too many more weaknesses because I try to stay humble, where I try to work with God on, helping me out on that one.
That's
but
beautiful.
Your topic is so wonderful. It's just, you said something about people don't know who they are,
Mm-hmm.
and then they can't pick the person that they're supposed to be. But I think knowing who you are, sometimes if your family has worked with you when you was a child and really worked with you, that really helps a person know who they are.
Yeah.
I found out people that don't have that, they're kind of scattered, and that's bad. And you try to help them get it together, but you correct. They can't seem to figure it out because they don't know what's going on inside of them. And it's really, really sad.
Yeah, man.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Priority number 1. I always said priority number 1 is you got to know you. You got to know you.
But that's hard. You get that from childhood a lot.
Yeah.
But you still change, but
Yep.
you still got to keep up with yourself.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Thanks
All
for the
right.
phone call. Good phone call. Thanks, Anita. All right, Nate, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Linal. How you doing, brother?
I'm well, man.
All right, happy anniversary too, man.
Thank
you know, 8 years,
that.
right?
Eight years, yeah, man. Real
yeah,
awesome.
that's a nice amount of time, brother. I'm gonna be brief this morning, man. But have you ever heard of the term called AOMS?
AOMS, no, enlighten me.
That stands for Attitude of Mutual Service. And I'm not married, but that what I just explained to you can be used in any relationship, friendship, family relationship, marriage. Attitude of mutual service is treating somebody how you want to be treated. And I know it sounds simple, but to me, and that's why I feel so blessed, because my attitude of mutual service helps me understand how everybody is designed differently. So with having the attitude of mutual service means, say for instance, like you're married, and being married takes two and takes understanding, but that attitude of mutual service is making sure that your spouse is okay. You know what I mean? And vice versa. Taking care of each other. If you can understand what I'm saying, but that attitude of mutual service, I think, creates a nice longevity and a nice frame of mind for a long-lasting relationship.
I love that.
Pretty much
Nate,
it.
let me ask you a question, man. Let me ask you a question. You married, brother?
No, single.
You're not?
Yep.
All right. Let me because I love where you're going. Let me tell you something I've learned in marriage. Now, that's one of the reasons I asked. Attitude of mutual service works, but you got to go further.
Right.
And the reason I say you got to go further is because when I've done for my wife what I would do for myself, I also stop. Listen to this. I also stop for her where I stop for myself.
Okay.
And that doesn't always work because she may require more than I require. And so if I stop, because I'm like, well, this is typically enough for me, and I'm gonna, the other thing, like attitude of mutual service reminds me of the golden rule.
Okay.
Right? Do unto others as you want them to do unto you.
Yes, definitely.
And what I found is, and I found this out in the first 2 years of marriage, is that don't always work.
Right.
Right? Because my wife might be like, why did you do that? And I'm like, well, I would do that to myself. You're like, wait, I wasn't doing anything mean or demeaning or, something I wanted to hurt you, but she's hurt, bro.
Right.
And I'm like, man, like I would, okay. And what I learned is that I have to get intimately acquainted with what works for her. And that's why I say the starting point, like you're in a great starting point, because if you know what works for you, then it actually gives you the space to get curious about what works for somebody else.
Right.
Right. But if I don't even know what works for me, I'm so bewildered by the curveballs I'm thrown in relationship. And I'm so in my own process, I can't be over there with her.
Right. Right.
And so where you at is a good starting point. But what I would say is then if you got to take it to the next level, is I'm operating with this attitude of mutual service, or I'm operating from the golden rule, and what works for you? What do you think is respectful or disrespectful? Because
hey, Linal, did you get the package I sent you?
Oh, that's from you, Nate. Yeah, I did. I just got it this past week, man. I just got it this past week.
Okay.
Yeah, picked it up at the
worry
post
about
office.
yourself is something else. That speaks into what you're talking about now. Worry about yourself. That's a part of it as well.
Absolutely,
so I wanted to make sure you got it, man. So,
I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate it.
No problem, man.
Okay.
No problem.
All right, good stuff.
All right.
Okay. All right, man. Yeah, good stuff. Good question from Nate. Nate sent me a package of sweater, hats, things like that. So thank you for that, Nate. Appreciate it. And good comment. And I had to ask him if he was married, because I think for those of us who are married, we know you got to take it just a little bit further. You got to take it. And again, it's one of the reasons why being clear on who you are is so important, because it gives you the space to get curious and clear about who your spouse is. All right. So a few more questions in the area of, I think we might spend the whole show just on step number 1, you guys. I didn't anticipate this, but that means we got great content for the next few weeks. You want to keep listening. This gives you time to tell your friends, tell your loved ones. So 1, know who you are, love who you are. Then we said, okay, part of knowing who you are is knowing your strengths. Part of knowing who you are is knowing your weaknesses. Part of knowing who you are is knowing your passions. Knowing your passions. In the purpose course, one of the things I say about passions is your passions are your mental and spiritual GPS and direction notification. So when you know your passions, this gives you an idea of directionally where you intend to go in the short term. I say the short term because passions do change. But in the short term, let's say the next year, 2 years, 3 years, this is where I am. And if I know my own passions, it actually gives me a foundation to stand on in the dating conversation, because these are the things I'm interested in. Do they even stand out for this individual I'm looking to date? Or do they even make sense? Or are they even interested in these type of things? All too often, because I don't know my passions, listen to this, I allow my passion to direct me versus my passions, and I end up with someone who we're passionate about different things. And we didn't know we were passionate about different things because we were so blinded by the passion. Undo that one. All right. So passions. Now here's the other one. We've got to assess our wounds. All right. This is number 4 within step number 1. Okay. Again, remember step number 1, know who you are, love who you are. The 4 that I'm talking about within step number 1, what are your strengths? 2, what are your weaknesses? 3, what are your passions? 4, have you assessed your wounds? Now, this is a big one, because most of us carry some level of trauma that has been mapped onto our value. I'm going to say this again. Most of us carry some level of trauma that can get mapped onto our value, my worthiness, my ability to love myself. And because of that, we don't believe we are worthy of love due to this trauma. Now, whether this trauma came from sexual abuse, verbal abuse, or just social manipulation, if you don't feel worthy of love, if you don't feel worthy of happiness, consider that you need healing. Now, this here can get complicated, and so I'm just going to take my time. Because if I have trauma and I get into a relationship and I lack, like I don't believe I'm worthy, then this will make it where I struggle to hold my partner accountable because I'm afraid that they will leave me. I'm afraid of the consequence of holding my partner accountable. And it can be to simple things like just simply respecting me, simply seeing me, just simple things. I know often, I look at some relationships and I wonder to myself, how did it get there? Like, how is it that this individual is disrespecting the other one? And in such a horrible way. And how is it that the one being disrespected seems to be okay with it? But it comes down to a lack of self-love. But that lack of self-love typically is connected to some type of trauma. Some type of trauma. And that trauma, if it hasn't been healed, is mapping onto their worthiness. They don't feel worthy. So even though this woman is mistreating me, even though this man is mistreating me, I don't feel worthy of their love already. And so who am I to hold them accountable? Because God knows they might leave me. Now, some of us who have this type of trauma can't even get into relationship because we can't even believe that someone would truly love us because we haven't learned to love ourselves. And so this is what I have to say. If you know you've been through some level of trauma, before engaging with someone else in a relationship, please, please, please get your healing. Please get your healing. I see talk of ACA in the Facebook stream. Man, that's a phenomenal program. My wife and I both are going through ACA. ACA, if you don't know, is adult children of alcoholics. And our parents weren't alcoholics. But what it does is it helps you get underneath your stuff. The stuff that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. If you're looking to really, truly, powerfully, like shift any generational curses, ACA is a phenomenal work step, 12-step program. I don't know who brought it up, but man. Okay. Now, here's the other thing I want to say to those of us who have trauma. Here's another reason you want to get your healing. Now, listen to me, and listen to me good. Wolves can spot weak prey. Let me say it again. Wolves can spot weak prey. And if you have unhealed trauma, consider that you are wounded and weak emotionally. And wolves prey on people who are wounded and weak. Okay? They prey on people who are wounded and weak. And the reason they prey on people who are wounded and weak is because they know that this person doesn't feel worthy and will allow them to do all types of things that they want to do. I used to say when I was single, I would have this conversation. And now that I'm not single, when I'm talking to especially female clients, men, we have a way of like spotting someone who's wounded. And what I mean by wounded is, could be a beautiful young lady, gorgeous on the outside, wounded on the inside. But you can tell in her spirit she's wounded. Because by the way, these are spiritual wounds. And you can tell she's wounded, and you can tell that she's going to give me way more rope than her friends. Right? Her other friends are around her laughing and talking. You can just see the insecurity. You can see the lack of confidence. It's soothing off of her. And that's why a lot of times wolves will go in for the kill. And by the way, the girlfriends know she's wounded. They're like, get away from here, wolf. Right? They're not saying it like that, but like, back up. But why are the guys constantly going for her? She's wounded. And they see it. They can smell it like sharks, blood in the water. No different than men. There are women who can tell a man is wounded. And they will say, oh, everything he's got in his account is about to be in my account. Why? He's wounded. Wolves, wolves can spot weak prey. Because of this, you owe it to yourself to get healed. And your healing will support your happiness. Your healing will support your ability to get healthy. Your healing will support a future loving and long-lasting relationship. But you must love yourself first. You must love you first before someone else will adequately love you. You must. And here's the other thing. If you do meet someone who wants to adequately love you, if you don't love yourself, you won't accept the love. Step number one. Know who you are and love who you are. Okay. So let's move to step number 2. By the way, if you have any questions about step number 1, give me a phone call, 773-591-1690. Step number 2, this one won't surprise you. Step number 2, know and live your life's purpose. You knew this was one of the steps. You knew it. Now, I know this is a deep step. But the last time I checked, committed romantic relationships have depth, which means that if committed romantic relationships have depth, you want to go into the relationship with depth. What gives you depth? Not just knowing yourself, but knowing your life's purpose. And a man or woman who has clarity on their purpose also has clarity on who they are as a human being. Why? Because purpose provides identity. Purpose provides identity. If I find it hard to believe that we can truly get to know someone else, if I haven't taken the time to get to know myself, then, man, this whole purpose conversation gets even more difficult. So to know your purpose means that you know your reason for living and being. And I believe this is an absolute must if you plan on living and being with someone else. Our purpose provides our identity. It's who we be on a very spiritual level. And again, purpose is spiritual. So two people who decide to venture into a relationship without the individual knowledge of who they are and what their purpose is, they're bound to encounter some grave difficulties. And here's the other reason I believe you need to know your purpose. You need to know your purpose on the planet. Why are you here? Because if you don't know why you're here, then it's very easy to get aligned with someone else who doesn't know why they're here. And then all of a sudden, both of y'all lost. And if you're looking at him to lead you, and he doesn't know why he's here, and he's lost, you're lost, and now you're mad because he's lost, and he's supposed to be the quote unquote leader, but you were lost when you met him. There's no man or woman out there who can rescue you spiritually. I'm going to say this again. There is no man or woman out there who can rescue you spiritually. You have to rescue yourself. What is your purpose? Why are you here? You have to know this and then get aligned with that purpose. Start doing work aligned with that purpose. And when you live aligned with that purpose, you set an intention aligned with that purpose. So now that I'm in love with myself and I know my purpose, I can get real clear about my intentions. Let me give you an example. When I met Pam, the first date was like, whoa. And it was like, whoa, because I knew upon meeting her that she could complement my purpose on the planet. I'm like, wow. Like, this woman is amazing. And because I knew my purpose, I could see that she would allow me to powerfully live my purpose because she met my intentions for what I wanted in a woman. And my intentions were crafted based on my life's purpose. And I thought she was fine. That helps too, right? But we have to know our purpose. Now, on shows in the past and on shows in the future, I'll spend a lot of time on purpose. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time today. But step number 2, know and live your life's purpose. And let me say this. I go harder on men when it comes to this. Woman, you know, you might be like, well, I think I know Linal, and that's fine. But brothers, don't be out here stepping into marriage, new relationships, and you don't know where you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, you're about to take a woman down a route that neither of you know where you're going. You're about to get somebody else lost. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family. You owe it to your legacy to know your purpose. To know your purpose on the planet. To me, it's just part of being responsible. Not only with your life, but the life of someone else that you made a vow to protect and provide for. You got to know your purpose. Women, it should be one of the first questions you ask in the dating process. Do you know your purpose? And a man that knows his purpose, he's going to get excited about it. The first date is probably going to be about it. Just let it be. A man who doesn't, he's going to be like, well, what I believe I'm here for. You'll know. You'll know he BSing you. You don't want to get with a man who don't know where you're going. You just don't. Step number 2, know and live your purpose. All right, we're going to go to step number 3, but I got a phone call. Susan, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Always good teaching. Always good teaching. I really normally try to avoid calling because I don't want to interrupt the lesson. It's like,
all
okay.
Right. It's all right. It's all right.
But this time, I'm like, no, I got to call on this one. The ACA.
Yeah.
How did you guys come to that if neither of you have that in your family?
Good question. So here's the thing. It may not be in our direct family history, like our parents, but our grandparents got it. You get where I'm going? And because they got it, there are ways of being that were mapped onto our parents that were mapped onto us. That makes sense?
Okay. Oh, total sense.
And you begin, and this is one of the beautiful things about coaching, because coaching is about creating from the future. And therapy is about healing the past, right? So when I was talking about wounds, I'm like, get therapy.
Yeah.
But often when
I've been doing that.
Beautiful. But often when we're creating from the future, right? I'm creating my future. I begin to run into these emotional blocks. And as I look at these emotional blocks, I might talk to my therapist and it's like, ooh, that's a pattern. Where'd you learn that pattern? Well, most of us learned our patterns from our parents.
Yes.
And the way to begin proactively, because I don't want to see, I'm at the point now that Legend's 3.5 years old. He'll be 4 this year. So now I'm thinking like, okay, man, my mom was raised underneath a pattern, right? And we got to think about this too as children of slaves, right? And when I say that, like, we're what, 3-4 generations removed? That's it? We're
not far.
Right.
The more I learn history, the more I realize just how close we really are.
We are.
Pullman porters were slaves. They said I just heard that the other day. They were perfect porters because they were slaves.
That's right.
How many people we know whose families were porters?
Exactly. My grandmother was a sharecropper, which means her grandmother likely was a slave. You get where I'm going? Or her mother. And so when we start looking at this, there are ways of being that have been mapped from that trauma that come across as normal to a lot of us. And it begins to show up in relationship, but more importantly, it shows up in our parenting. And it shows up in our parenting in ways that we don't even see. Because, man, let me tell you, the other day I was watching Legend, and he was literally mimicking me. Like he was watching how I moved, and he would do it. And I'm like, they watch so closely.
Yeah.
So if there's patterns that I have, I don't have time for the coaching to reveal the need for therapy, to go to the therapist, and the therapist to do the healing. It's like I got to just go at this. And in my work with the coaches and colleagues that I have, in my experience, the best way to go at it is through ACA and in a 12-step program.
Wow.
Yeah. Great question. Great question.
Yeah. Because I know you talk about wait before anything else. You have to heal first, and this isn't the first time you said this. You say this over and over.
Yep.
But there was one in particular I want to say about a year or so ago And, you know, you really went into that and said, you know, you're right. I think it may have been around the time with the lady who makes a lot of money but loses a lot of money, and she's like, why?
Okay.
Remember her?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, you got to do the work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The frustrating part about doing the work, though, is it goes so slow.
But, you know, here's the thing. It's about the investment. It's no different than if you were in school to get a law degree. Right? Well, 4 years of painstaking work, and it takes a long time, seemingly, until 10 years after graduation, look where you are. 20 years after graduation, look where you are. And so often, here's the thing, often we get caught up in the work, and we're not really, this is one of the things, matter of fact, it's a great segue into step number 3. Know your vision for your future.
Okay.
That click. So if I know my vision for my future, I'm willing to do the work.
Yeah.
If I have a vision for Legend's future. And so when I begin to see patterns in myself that got mapped from my parents, that got mapped from their parents, and got mapped from their parents, and the more I look at it, I realize that it's post-traumatic slave syndrome. And I'm thinking, well, I want to be free, but I definitely want to make sure he's free. Then that work can't go slow enough to get me unenrolled. You get where I'm going? Like, it can't, because even if it took me 10 years, he would be 13, which means that who I am in his teenage years would be powerful for him.
Okay.
You get where I'm going?
Oh, yeah.
And so,
yeah, I do.
So when I know my vision for the future, and I'm playing my game from that vision, nothing seems like it takes too much time. And here's the other thing, nothing seems like it costs too much money.
Because you're hitting that goal, you're hitting that vision.
I'm willing to make that sacrifice because I know where I'm going. The same way a law student knows where they're going, which is why they're willing to endure the pain.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
As per usual, Mr. Ontological.
Yeah, ontological. That's right. That's right.
Yep.
All right. Thanks so much for the phone call. Great phone call. All right. Susan got us right into step number 3. Step number 3. You want to be in a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship, then you got to know your vision for the future. You got to be crystal clear on your vision for the future. Now, if you're just tuning in, step number 1 is know who you are, love who you are. Step number 2 is know and live your life's purpose. Step number 3, know your vision for the future. Notice step number 3 is after you distinguish your purpose, because your purpose helps you lay out your life's vision. Because now I know why I'm here. I know who I am. And so I'm pretty clear on where I should be going. Now, a person's vision typically includes what they see or imagine for their future. So another way to think about this is a vision is the mind's screenplay for what's possible in the future. So if you ask a person about their vision and if you ask a person about their vision, their answer will always reveal a lot about what they see for themselves in their future. Right? I just shared a bit of my vision with Susan for my son. That tells you a lot about me. It tells you a lot about what I see in my future. Now, here's a little hint. If a wife, a husband, a family isn't in that vision, don't think that you can magically insert this for them. Remember, it's their vision. You want to know, I know one of the biggest questions that often, I hate to say it, is young ladies, not men, but there's a few of them out there, a few men out there who probably have this question. The biggest question is, where is this going? Stop asking that man, where is this going? All you got to do, here's the best way to find out, what's your vision for the future? So you got to shift the context. You ask a man, where is this going? He know where you going. He like, oh boy, we're about to get into that marriage conversation or that get serious conversation or that boyfriend, girlfriend conversation. He's going to try to avoid it. He's going to tell you something good that you want to hear. But if you just shift it up and be like, I'm curious. I was thinking about the next 5 years and what I'm going to do and where I'm going to work and what I want to create. What's your vision? And if he goes into his vision and he's talking about all the things that he's going to do, and there's no wife, there's no children, there's no family, it don't have nothing to do with you, consider that his vision has nothing to do with you. Man, I know this is a tough pill to swallow. Okay, but if you've already had the where's this going conversation and it keeps coming up the same way in a loop, because by the way, like a guy who really understands how to play the game knows how to put you right into a loop and then make you guilty for asking the question, why you always starting something? Why we can't just be? We were having a good evening, and then here you go. You got to ask me, where is this going? And you feel guilty. You feel guilty for even asking the question when all you want to know is this man's vision. Ask the man his vision. Stop asking where we going. Ask him where he's going. Because then if you're going to be with him, he's going to tell you. And if you're not going to be with him, it's going to show up in his answer. That right there, I'm giving you game. That's free game. That's not even part of the script. That's just free game. You want to be in a relationship? You think the guy that you're with right now is relationship worthy, or you're wondering if he's relationship worthy? Ask the man if he knows his vision. Here's the other thing. A person's vision will also reveal compatibility. If your latest crush has a vision to travel the world as a missionary, and you hate to travel, and you think that's the love of your life, why are you setting yourself up for disappointment? Your latest crush is talking about going into the field and living in the bush. That's their vision. That's what they want to do. And you're like, well, when you going to do that? They're like, a couple of years from now when I get all the stuff handled. And you know that's not something you want to do. Go ahead and save yourself some heartache. Because either you're going to cry now or you're going to be crying 2 years from now when they leave. What's the vision? Like, a person's vision gives away so much. If they don't have one, that gives away so much. A huge part of my initial attraction to my wife was her vision for her life. I asked her, what's your vision? Where you going? And as she started to share with me, I started seeing how her vision aligned with mine. I could actually see us in the first date, the second date, building a life together based on the visions we were sharing with one another. And again, I said it before, I thought she was fine. So it made it even easier. Let me tell you all, it's not rocket science, man. It's not. But here's the thing. Relationship has this way of getting us, like, because our emotions get involved, right? It has this way of getting us, like, knocking us off our cues or off our normal way of being. And we got to go into this dating process. And this is another reason. Let me just say this, okay? I'm just going to shut down the notes, have a conversation with y'all for the last 15 minutes. So one of the things I talked about is how knowing yourself, loving yourself, that's spiritual. Knowing your purpose is spiritual. Vision is spiritual. Why is vision spiritual? Because the only way that we can create in this earth realm is to tap into the spiritual realm. How do you tap into the spiritual realm? I'm going to get to it later. It's not going to be today. It's going to be next week. But We get into it by our words, right? Words are spiritual. You create with your words. You declare things out into the universe. Why? How can we do that? Why? Well, because we have a piece of God in us. God is a creator that makes us micro creators, so we can create things. So when it comes back to this vision piece, you gotta know what you want. Matter of fact, next week, I'm just gonna give you a little clue in for next week. Next week, number 4 is know what you want in a woman or a man. Be intentional. But see, here's the thing. So we can't even go there, because in order for you to know what you want, you got to know yourself. A lot of us, we have no idea, really, truly, what we want. You think you know because we've been socialized to think we know. You think what you want is what you see on Instagram. Bro, you don't want that. I'm so grateful to God for my wife. Oh, I couldn't imagine. Hey, no shade on the Instagram influencers. I couldn't imagine being with one. Man, a couple of years ago, I was on the plane, actually headed back from Ghana for the transformational tour of Ghana. I sat next to this social media influencer. Millions of followers. Young lady. Okay? You could tell she had the work done to her lips, the work done all over the place. And we got into a deep conversation because I care about people. I was asking her about her happiness. I was asking her about where she wanted to go in her life. She found out I was a coach. She started asking me questions. Well, you start asking me questions. I'm a coach. I'm going to start asking you questions. Here's what I got down to. Incredibly unhappy. Millions of people following her. Incredibly unhappy. Embarrassed about who she is and what she does. Like, I said, oh, so you're on Instagram, I'll follow you. Oh, well, just a heads up, on Instagram, one of the ways I make money is, they these brands want me to take pictures in swimsuits, and so I'm trying to get out of it. But here's the thing. She's not the only one. I have clients who are influencers, who are trying to get out of that work. What happens is, men, we're being bombarded by these images and we say, well, that's what I want. No, bro, get to know you. Get to know who you are. Get to know your purpose. Cast a vision for your life. And then ask yourself, does that actually match where you're going? Because more than likely it doesn't. I'm so grateful to God for my wife. I'm so grateful. But the world is telling us that you want the guy who has money. Man, I got stories for days. Another story, young lady dating a young man she thought had money. He had the beautiful loft downtown, driving a Beamer, all the things on the outside that she wanted. They went off, they got married. A month later, she moves in with him after marriage, and he begins to lay out the bills and say, which ones you gonna pay? Wait a second. I thought he was a baller. I thought he had money. Because what she wanted was a man with money. That's what she thought she wanted, was a man with money. And so that's what she was going for, a man with money. But see, the thing is, when you have surface level wants in a partner, then you can get fooled by somebody who knows that's what you want in your partner. Turns out he was broke. And he married her because he needed help, financial help. That's not what she bargained for. They fell into the statistics I talked about earlier. Divorce. Do you really know what you want? And do you really know yourself? Because if you know yourself, then you start to get clear on what you really, truly want. Oh man, she wear the baddest outfits. Always got Gucci this, Gucci that. Oh, you want that? You want to, so you want to finance that habit? That's what you want? Okay. You sure that's what you want? Oh man, always has a brand new car. Did you see his apartment, his loft? Oh, he's killing the game. That's what you want? Are you really sure you want that? That's because, all the attention goes on what he's driving, what he has, what he's wearing. Is he going to extend that attention to you? Hey man, we think we know what we want. Y'all come back next week. Because we're going to cover the last of these 7. We got through the first 3. We're going to cover the last 4 next week. 7 steps to creating a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship. If you just joined us, number 1, know who you are, love who you are. Number 2, know and live your life's purpose. Number 3, know your vision for your life. Know your vision for your life before you marry your wife. That way you make sure you're both going in the same direction and it doesn't end in strife. Little kickback freestyle for y'all. Let's go to line 1. Jay, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. I was just listening to you. Just wanted to add to the conversation. Number 3 is know your vision for the future.
That's right.
However, I think you must also be aware of the company you keep. You said legend mimics you.
Yeah.
Women not raised with their father will mimic their mother and the decision she's made in her life. So you might be in for a bad relationship. And I think bad company can influence your behavior and change the course of your life. Bad relationships, so if you get into a relationship with someone that was raised in an unhealthy way, and I think if in one parent household that's not healthy, it's going to influence.
And you know what? Here's what I'll say to that, Jay. I get where you're going.
Okay.
Because being in a one parent household, there are things that you learn about relationship. It can work both ways, man. A person can be in a 2-parent household and see their father abuse their mother and turn into an abuser, or marry an abusive man. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have to do our work. We have to do our work. And that's why I said in step 1, that's why therapy is so important. That's why I love the phone call from Susan where she asked the question about ACA and disrupting patterns. Because there are tools out here that will help us be the best person we can be despite how we were raised.
Well, you can always add a different factor into that abuse, but I was making my point from the assumption that you was raised in a healthy household. It's just it was a one-parent household. And even from a healthy perspective, a one-parent household, whether it's raised by just your mother or by your father, it's not going to be good for the person that is trying to have a relationship with that individual. But I'm looking specifically at girls who were raised just by their mother. Because when they see a man, they look at him as a tool and somebody that's supposed to just do for them, and they don't see your humanity.
I think that depends on how the mother raised them, brother. I really do. There's some single mothers out here doing a bang up job, man, and teaching them properly. So and that's my we gotta. Hey, here's the thing: none of us are perfect, and none of us have been raised perfectly. Let me be clear. I love the opportunity my parents gave me. I love the opportunity. I love the fact that I was raised by both parents. Okay? And there is a disadvantage to being raised by a single parent, mother or father. But I don't think that we can map that onto an individual and come out with a formula that says, hey, don't mess with a woman that was raised by her mother. I disagree with that. For any woman who was raised by her mother, she has to do her work. For any woman that was raised by both parents, she has to do her work. And guess what? No matter what, the relationship is still going to be work. And whatever was missing, I'll give you a perfect example. You know, my mom and my dad, there were dynamics in their relationship that does not work for my relationship. And there were things that I learned inherently from just watching the dynamics of their relationship that my wife and I have to work through. It's like, well, Linal, I want this and that. I never saw it. I never saw it done. And so it's like, okay. And so I had to learn how to do those things. You're going to run into challenges, which is why you want to cover these 7 steps first. So that way, when the challenges come, and by the way, when you make the mistakes, you can do like we did last week and look back on the mistakes and say, we conquered that. We conquered that. All right, I got 60 seconds for Maddie. Maddie, good morning. How are you?
Fine. I'm not going to take long, but I was wondering, could you suggest some very good books to read dealing with the various subjects that you cover? Okay, absolutely. I'll make up since I'm on for 60 seconds. Bye-bye.
Yep, absolutely. So, you know what, Maddie? I'm going to take that as homework. You guys listen next week. I'll open the show because I only have 30 seconds. And I just don't want to toss books. There's some really good books that my wife and I have read, that I would love to share with you all. And so I'm putting that here to bring books to next week's show. So you guys listen next week. We're going to cover the last 4 steps in how to create a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship. You do not want to miss step number 4, 5, 6, and 7. You don't want to miss step number 4 when I break it down, especially the ladies. Oh, you don't want to miss this one. It's going to change your life. We'll be back next week. My name is Linal Harris. You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host and life coach right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. 7 steps to creating a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship. Part 1. Part 2 will be next week. Thank you guys for listening. Stay safe, stay warm, and be blessed. Good morning. All right, you guys. That's the show. Hopefully that made a difference for you. If it did, please share the stream. And I look forward to connecting with you guys next week.